Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage formed a partnership. They kept a house together, and for a long time they lived in peace and prosperity, acquiring many possessions. The bird's task was to fly into the forest every day to fetch wood. The mouse carried water, made the fire, and set the table. The sausage did the cooking. Whoever is too well off always wants to try something different. Thus, one day, the bird chanced to meet another bird, who boasted to him about his own situation. This bird criticized him for working so hard, while the other two enjoyed themselves at home. For, after the mouse had made the fire and carried the water, she could sit in the parlor and rest until it was time for her to set the table. The sausage had only to stay by the pot, watching the food cook. When mealtime approached, she would slither through the porridge or the vegetables, and thus everything was greased and salted, and ready to eat. The bird would bring his load of wood home. They would eat their meal, and then sleep soundly until the next morning. It was a great life. The next day, because of his friend's advice, the bird refused to go to the forest, saying that he had been their servant for long enough. He was no longer going to be a fool for them. Everyone should try a different task for a change. The mouse and the sausage argued against this, but the bird was the master, and he insisted that they give it a try. The sausage was to fetch wood. The mouse became the cook, and the bird was to carry the water. And what was the result? The sausage trudged off towards the forest. The bird made the fire, and the mouse put on the pot and waited for the sausage to return with the wood for the next day. However, the sausage stayed out so long that the other two feared that something bad had happened. The bird flew off to see if he could find her. A short distance away he came upon a dog that had seized the sausage as free booty and was making off with her. The bird complained bitterly to the dog about this brazen abduction, but he claimed that he had discovered forged letters on the sausage, and that she would thus have to forfeit her life to him. Filled with sorrow, the bird carried the wood home himself, and told the mouse what he had seen and heard. They were very sad, but were determined to stay together and make the best of it. The bird set the table while the mouse prepared the food. She jumped into the pot, as the sausage had always done, in order to slither and weave in and about the vegetables and grease them. But before she reached the middle, her hair and skin were scalded off, and she perished. When the bird wanted to eat, no cook was there, beside himself. He threw the wood this way and that, called out, looked everywhere, but no cook was to be found. Because of his carelessness, the scattered wood caught fire, and the entire house was soon aflame. The bird rushed to fetch water, but the bucket fell into the well, carrying him with it, and he drowned. In ancient times, a giant was wandering along the highway, when suddenly a stranger jumped toward him and shouted, "Stop! Not one step further." "What?" said the giant. "You, a creature that I could crush between my fingers. You want to block my way? Who are you that you dare to speak so boldly?" "I am Death," answered the other one. "No one resists me, and you too must obey my orders." But the giant refused, and began to wrestle with Death. It was a long, violent battle, and finally the giant got the upper hand, and knocked Death down with his fist, causing him to collapse by a stone. The giant went on his way, and Death lay there conquered, so weak that he could not get up again. "What is to come of this?" he said. "If I stay lying here in a corner, no one will die in the world, and it will become so filled with people that they won't have room to stand beside one another." Meanwhile, a young man came down the road, vigorous and healthy. He was singing a song and looking this way and that. Seeing the half-conscious individual, he approached him with compassion, raised him up, gave him a refreshing drink from his flask, and waited until he regained his strength. "Do you know," asked the stranger as he stood up, "who I am, and whom you've helped onto his legs again?" "No," answered the youth, "I do not know you." "I am Death," he said. "I spare no one, nor can I make an exception with you. However, so you may see that I am grateful, I promise you that I will not attack you without warning, but instead will send my messengers to you before I come and take you away." "Good," said the youth. "It is to my benefit that I shall know when you are coming, and that I will be safe from you until then." Then he went on his way, and was cheerful and carefree, and lived one day at a time. However, youth and good health did not last long. Soon came sickness and pain, which tormented him by day, and deprived him of his rest by night. "I shall not die," he said to himself, "for Death will first send his messengers. But I do wish these wicked days of sickness were over." Regaining his health, he began once more to live cheerfully. Then one day someone tapped on his shoulder. He looked around, and Death was standing behind him, who said, "Follow me. The hour of your departure from this world has come." "What?" replied the man. "Are you breaking your word? Did you not promise me that you would send your messengers to me before you yourself would come? I have not seen a one of them." "Be still," answered Death. "Have I not sent you one messenger after another? Did not fever come and strike you, and shake you, and throw you down? Has not dizziness numbed your head? Has not gout pinched your limbs? Did your ears not buzz? Did toothache not bite into your cheeks? Did your eyes not darken? And furthermore, has not my own brother Sleep reminded you every night of me? During the night did you not lie there as if you were already dead?" The man did not know how to answer, so he surrendered to his fate and went away with Death. Three army surgeons, who thought they knew their art perfectly, were travelling about the world, and they came to an inn where they wanted to pass the night. The host asked whence they came, and whither they were going. "We are roaming about the world, and practicing our art." "Just show me for once in a way what you can do," said the host. Then the first said he would cut off his hand, and put it on again early next morning. The second said he would tear out his heart, and replace it next morning. The third said he would cut out his eyes, and heal them again next morning. "If you can do that," said the innkeeper, "you have learned everything." They, however, had a salve, with which they rubbed themselves, which joined parts together, and they carried the little bottle, in which it was, constantly with them. Then they cut the hand, heart, and eyes from their bodies, as they had said they would, and laid them all together on a plate, and gave it to the innkeeper. The innkeeper gave it to a servant, who was to set it in the cupboard, and take good care of it. The girl, however, had a lover in secret, who was a soldier. When, therefore, the innkeeper, the 3 army surgeons, and everyone else in the house were asleep, the soldier came and wanted something to eat. The girl opened the cupboard and brought him some food, and in her love forgot to shut the cupboard door again. She seated herself at the table by her lover, and they chatted away together. While she sat so contently there, thinking of no ill luck, the cat came creeping in, found the cupboard open, took the hand and heart and eyes of the 3 army surgeons, and ran off with them. When the soldier had done eating, and the girl was taking away the things and going to shut the cupboard, she saw that the plate which the innkeeper had given her to take care of was empty. Then she said in a fright to her lover, "Ah, miserable girl, what shall I do? The hand is gone, the heart and the eyes are gone too. What will become of me in the morning?" "Be easy," said he. "I will help thee out thy trouble. There is a thief hanging outside on the gallows. I will cut off his hand." "What hand was it?" "The right one." Then the girl gave him a sharp knife, and he went and cut the poor sinner's right hand off, and brought it to her. After this, he caught the cat and cut its eyes out, and now nothing but the heart was wanting. "Have you not been killing, and are not the dead pigs in the cellar?" said he. "Yes," said the girl. "That's well," said the soldier, and he went down and fetched a pig's heart. The girl placed all together on the plate, and put it in the cupboard, and when after this her lover took leave of her, she went quietly to bed. In the morning, when the 3 army surgeons got up, they told the girl she was to bring them the plate, on which the hand, heart and eyes were lying. Then she brought it out of the cupboard, and the first fixed the thief's hand on, and smeared it with his salve, and it grew to his arm directly. The second took the cat's eyes, and put them in his own head. The third fixed the pig's heart firm in the place where his own had been. And the innkeeper stood by and admired their skill, and said he had never seen such a thing as that done, and would sing their praises and recommend them to everyone. Then they paid their bill and travelled farther. As they were on their way, the one with the pig's heart did not stay with them at all, but wherever there was a corner, he ran to it, and rooted about in it, with his nose as pigs do. The others wanted to hold him back by the tail of his coat, but that did no good. He tore himself loose, and ran wherever dirt was thickest. The second also behaved very strangely. He rubbed his eyes and said to the others, "Comrades, what is the matter? I don't see at all. Will one of you lead me so that I don't fall?" Then, with difficulty, they travelled on till evening. When they reached another inn, they went into the bar together, and there at a table in the corner sat a rich man counting money. The one with the thief's hand walked round about him, made a sudden movement twice with his arm, and at last, when the stranger turned away, he snatched a pile of the money, and took a handful from it. One of them saw this, and said, "Comrade, what art thou about? Thou must not steal. Shame on thee!" "Eh," said he, "but how can I stop myself? My hand twitches, and I am forced to snatch things whether I will or not." After this, they lay down to sleep, and while they were lying there, it was so dark that no one could see his own hand. All at once, the one with the cat's eyes awoke, aroused the others, and said, "Brothers, just look up. Do you see the white mice running about there?" The 2 sat up, but could see nothing. Then said he, "Things are not right with us. We have not got back again what is ours. We must return to the innkeeper. He has deceived us." They went back, therefore, the next morning, and told the host they had not got what was their own again, that the first had a thief's hand, the second cat's eyes, and the third a pig's heart. The innkeeper said that the girl must be to blame for that, and was going to call her. But when she had seen the three coming, she had run out by the back door, and not come back. Then the three said he must give them a great deal of money, or they would set his house on fire. He gave them what he had, and whatever he could get together, and the three went away with it. It was enough for the rest of their lives. But they would rather have had their own proper organs. There was once on a time a poor man, who could no longer support his only son. Then said the son, "Dear father, things go so badly with us that I am a burden to you. I would rather go away and see how I can earn my bread." So the father gave him his blessing, and with great sorrow took leave of him. At this time the king of a mighty empire was at war, and the youth took service with him, and with him went out to fight. And when he came before the enemy, there was a battle, and great danger, and it rained shot until all his comrades fell on all sides. And when the leader also was killed, those left were about to take flight. But the youth stepped forth, spoke boldly to them, and cried, "We will not let our fatherland be ruined." Then the others followed him, and he pressed on and conquered the enemy. When the king heard that he owed the victory to him alone, he raised him above all others, gave him great treasures, and made him the first in the kingdom. The king had a daughter who was very beautiful, but she was also very strange. She had made a vow to take no one as her lord and husband, who did not promise to let himself be buried alive with her if she died first. "If he loves me with all his heart," she said, "of what use will life be to him afterwards?" On her side she would do the same, and if he died first, would go down to the grave with him. This strange oath had up to this time frightened away all wooers, but the youth became so charmed with her beauty that he cared for nothing, but asked her father for her. "But dost thou know what thou must promise?" said the king. "I must be buried with her," he replied, "if I outlive her, but my love is so great that I do not mind the danger." Then the king consented, and the wedding was solemnized with great splendor. They lived now for a while, happy and contented with each other. And then it befell that the young queen was attacked by a severe illness, and no physician could save her. And as she lay there, dead, the young king remembered what he had obliged to promise, and was horrified at having to lie down alive in the grave. But there was no escape. The king had placed sentries at all the gates, and it was not possible to avoid his fate. When the day came when the corpse was to be buried, he was taken down into the royal vault with it, and then the door was shut and bolted. Near the coffin stood a table on which were 4 candles, 4 loaves of bread, and 4 bottles of wine. And when the provisions came to an end, he would die of hunger. And now he sat there full of pain and grief, ate every day only a little piece of bread, drank only a mouthful of wine, and nevertheless saw death daily drawing nearer. Whilst he thus gazed before him, he saw a snake creep out of the corner of the vault and approach the dead body. And as he thought it came to gnaw at it, he drew his sword and said, "As long as I live, thou shalt not touch her," and hewed the snake in 3 pieces. After a time a second snake crept out of a hole, and when it saw the other lying dead and cut into pieces, it went back, but soon came again with 3 green leaves in its mouth, then leaves on each wound. Immediately the severed parts joined themselves together. The snake moved and became alive again, and both of them hastened away together. The leaves were left lying on the ground, and a desire came into the mind of the unhappy man who had been watching all of this, to know if the wondrous power of the leaves which had brought the snake to life again could not likewise be the service to a human being. So he picked up the leaves and laid one of them on the mouth of his dead wife, and the two others on her eyes. And hardly had he done this, then the blood stirred in her veins, rose into her pale face and coloured it again. Then she drew breath, opened her eyes and said, "Ah, God, where am I?" "Thou art with me, dear wife," he answered, and told her how everything had happened, and how he had brought her back again to life. Then he gave her some wine and bread, and when she had regained her strength, he raised her up, and they went to the door and knocked, and called so loudly that the sentries heard it, and told the king. The king came down himself and opened the door, and there he found both strong and well, and rejoiced with them that now all sorrow was over. The young king, however, took the 3 snake leaves with him, gave them to a servant and said, "Keep them for me carefully, and carry them constantly about thee. Who knows in what trouble they may yet be a service to us." A change had, however, taken place in his wife. After she had been restored to life, it seemed as if all love for her husband had gone out of her heart. After some time, when he wanted to make a voyage over the sea to visit his old father, and they had gone on board a ship, she forgot the great love and fidelity which he had shown her, and which had been the means of rescuing her from death, and conceived a wicked inclination for the skipper. And once when the young king lay there asleep, she called in the skipper, and seized the sleeper by the head, and the skipper took him by the feet, and thus they threw him down into the sea. When the shameful deed was done, she said, "Now let us return home, and say that he died on the way. I will extol and praise thee, so to my father that he will marry me to thee, and make thee the heir to his crown." But the faithful servant who had seen all that they did, unseen by them, unfastened a little boat from the ship, got into it, sailed after his master, and let the traders go on their way. He fished up the dead body, and by the help of the 3 snake leaves, which he carried about him, and laid on the eyes and mouth, he fortunately brought the young king back to life. They both rowed with all their strength day and night, and their little boat flew so swiftly that they reached the old king before the others did. He was astonished when he saw them come alone, and asked what had happened to them. When he learned of the wickedness of his daughter, he said, "I cannot believe that she had behaved so ill, but the truth will soon come to light," and bade both go into the secret chamber and keep themselves hidden from everyone. Soon afterwards the great ship came sailing in, and the godless woman appeared before her father, with a troubled countenance. He said, "Why dost thou come back alone? Where is thy husband?" "Ah, dear father," she replied, "I come home again in great grief. During the voyage, my husband came suddenly ill and died, and if the good skipper had not given me his help, it would have gone ill with me. He was present at his death, and can tell you all." The king said, "I will make the dead alive again," and opened the chamber, and bade the 2 come out. When the woman saw her husband, she was thunderstruck, and fell on her knees and begged for mercy. The king said, "There is no mercy. He was ready to die with thee, and restored thee to life again. But thou hast murdered him in his sleep, and shalt receive the award that thou deservest." Then she was placed with her accomplice in the ship, which had been pierced with holes, and sent out to sea, where they soon sank amid the waves. A blood sausage and a liver sausage had been friends for some time, and the blood sausage invited the liver sausage for a meal at her house. At dinner time, the liver sausage merrily set out for the blood sausage's house. But when she walked through the doorway, she saw all kinds of strange things. There were many steps, and on each one of them she found something different. There was a broom and a shovel fighting with each other, a monkey with a big wound on its head, and more such things. The liver sausage was very frightened and upset by this. Nevertheless, she took heart, entered the room, and was welcomed in a friendly way by the blood sausage. The liver sausage began to inquire about the strange things on the stairs, but the blood sausage pretended not to hear her, or made it seem it was not worth talking about. Or she said something about the shovel and the broom, such as, "That was probably my maid gossiping with someone on the stairs." And she shifted the topic to something else. Then the blood sausage said she had to leave the room and go into the kitchen and look after the meal. She wanted to check to see if everything was in order and nothing had fallen into the ashes. The liver sausage began walking back and forth in the room and kept wondering about the strange things until someone appeared, I don't know who it was, and said, "Let me warn you, liver sausage, you're in a bloody murderer's trap. You'd better get out of here quickly, if you value your life." The liver sausage did not have to think twice about this. She ran out of the door as fast as she could, nor did she stop until she got out of the house and was in the middle of the street. Then she looked around and saw the blood sausage standing high up in the attic window with a long, long knife that was gleaming as though it had just been sharpened. The blood sausage threatened her with it and cried out, "If I had caught you, I would have had you." Once upon a time, there lived a nightingale and a blindworm, each with one eye. For a long time, they lived together peacefully and harmoniously in a house. However, one day the nightingale was invited to a wedding, and she said to the blindworm, "I've been invited to a wedding, and I don't particularly want to go with one eye. Would you be so kind as to lend me yours? I'll bring it back to you tomorrow." The blindworm gave her the eye out of the kindness of her heart. But when the nightingale came home the following day, she liked having two eyes in her head and being able to see on both sides. So she refused to return the borrowed eye to the blindworm. Then the blindworm swore that she would avenge herself on the nightingale's children and the children of her children. "Well," replied the nightingale, "see if you can find me. I'll build my nest in the linden, so high, so high, so high, you'll never be able to find it, no matter how hard you try." Ever since that time, all the nightingales have had two eyes, and all the blindworms, none. But wherever the nightingale builds her nest, a blindworm lives beneath it, in the bushes, and constantly tries to crawl up the tree, pierce the eggs of her enemy, and drink them up. Of course, you must know what a microscope is. That round magnifying glass that makes everything look hundreds of times larger than it really is. If you take it and hold it close to your eye, and look at a single drop of ditch water, you'll see thousands of strange little creatures, such as you couldn't imagine living in a drop of water. But they are really there. They look almost like a plate full of shrimp, all jumping and crowding against each other, and they are so ferocious they tear off each other's arms and legs. Yet, in their own way, they are happy and merry. Now, once there was an old man whom his neighbours called Cribble Crabble, for that was his name. He always tried to make the best of everything, and if he couldn't do it any other way, he would try magic. One day he sat with his eye glued to his microscope, peering at a drop of water taken from a puddle in the ditch. My, how they crawled and squirmed, all those thousands of little imps leaping and springing about, devouring each other, or pulling each other to pieces. "This is too hideous for words," said the old Cribble Crabble. "There must be some other way to make them live in peace and quiet, and each mind their own business." But though he thought and thought, he couldn't find the answer. So he decided to use magic. "At least I can give them color," he said, "so I can see them better." And then he let fall into the water a tiny drop of something that looked like red wine, but was really witch's blood, the very finest kind, and worth 2 pennies. Instantly the strange little creatures became red all over, and the drop of water now looked like a whole town full of naked wild men. "What have you got there?" asked another old magician, who had no name at all, which made him very distinguished. "If you can guess what it is," replied Cribble Crabble, "I'll give it to you, but it's not very easy to find out if one doesn't know." So, the nameless magician peered down through the microscope. The scene before his eyes really resembled a town, where all the inhabitants ran about without clothing. What a terrible sight it was! But it was still more horrible to see them kick and cuff, and struggle and fight, and pull and bite at each other. All those at the bottom were struggling to get to the top, and those at the top were being pushed to the bottom. "Look, look!" The creatures seemed to be crying. "His leg is longer than mine, bah! Off with it! And here's one with a little lump behind his ear. An innocent little lump, but it hurts him, and it'll hurt him more." And they hacked at it, and tore at him, and devoured him, all because of his little lump. But one sat very quiet and still, all by itself, like a modest maiden, wishing for nothing but peace and quiet. But the others couldn't stand for that. They pulled her out, beat her, cut her, and ate her. "This is extremely amusing," said the magician. "Yes, but what do you think it is?" asked Cribble Crabble. "Can you find out?" "Why, that's easy to see," answered the magician. "Of course, it's Copenhagen, or some other large city. I can't tell you which, for they all look alike, but it's certainly some large city." "It's a drop of ditch water," said Cribble Crabble. One time, the little hen and the little rooster went to Nut Mountain, and they agreed that whoever would find a nut would share it with the other one. Now the little hen found a large nut, but wanting to eat the kernel by herself, she said nothing about it. However, the kernel was so thick that she could not swallow it down. It got stuck in her throat, and fearing that she would choke to death, she cried out, "Little rooster, I beg you to run as fast as you can to the well and get me some water, or I'll choke to death." The little rooster ran to the well as fast as he could, and said, "Well, give me some water, for the little hen is lying on Nut Mountain. She swallowed a large nut kernel, and is about to choke to death on it." The well answered, "First, run to the bride, and get some red silk from her." The little rooster ran to the bride. "Bride, give me some red silk, and I'll give the red silk to the well, and the well will give me some water, and I'll take the water to the little hen who is lying on Nut Mountain. She swallowed a large nut kernel, and is about to choke to death on it." The bride answered, "First, run to my wreath. I got it caught on a willow branch." So the little rooster ran to the willow and pulled the wreath from its branch, and took it to the bride. And the bride gave him some red silk, which he took to the well, which gave him some water. And the little rooster took the water to the little hen. But when he arrived, she had already choked to death, and she lay there dead, and did not move at all. The little rooster was so sad that he cried aloud, and all the animals came to mourn for the little hen. 6 mice built a small carriage, which was to carry the little hen to her grave. When the carriage was finished, they hitched themselves to it, and the little rooster drove. On the way they met a fox. "Where are you going, little rooster?" "I'm going to bury my little hen. May I ride along?" "Yes, but you must sit at the rear, because my little horses don't like you too close to the front." So he sat at the rear, and then the wolf, the bear, the elk, the lion, and all the animals in the forest. They rode on until they came to a brook. "How can we get across?" said the little rooster. A straw was lying there next to the brook, and he said, "I'll lay myself across, and you can drive over me." But just as the 6 mice got onto the straw, it slipped into the water, and the 6 mice all fell in and drowned. They did not know what to do, until a coal came and said, "I'm large enough. I will lay myself across, and you can drive over me." So the coal laid itself across the water, but unfortunately it touched the water, hissed, and went out, and it was dead. A stone saw this happen, and wanting to help the little rooster, it laid itself across the water. The little rooster pulled the carriage himself. He nearly reached the other side with the dead little hen. But there were too many others seated on the back of the carriage, and the carriage rolled back, and they all fell into the water and drowned. Now the little rooster was all alone with the dead little hen. He dug a grave for her, and laid her inside. Then he made a mound on top, and sat on it, and grieved there for so long that he too died, and everyone was dead. In a city named Franeker, located in West Friesland, some young boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 6 happened to be playing with one another. They chose one boy to play the butcher, another boy to play the cook, and the third boy was to be a pig. Then they chose one girl to be a cook and another girl her assistant. The assistant was to catch the blood of the pig in a little bowl, so they could make sausages. As agreed, the butcher now fell upon the little boy playing the pig, threw him to the ground, and slit his throat open with a knife, while the assistant cook caught the blood in her little bowl. The councilman was walking nearby and saw this wretched act. He immediately took the butcher with him, and led him into the house of the mayor, who instantly summoned the entire council. They deliberated about the incident, and did not know what they should do to the boy, for they realized it had all been a part of a children's game. One of the councilmen, an old wise man, advised the chief judge to take a beautiful red apple in one hand and a rainish golden in the other. Then he was to call the boy and stretch out his hands to him. If the boy took the apple, he was to be set free. If he took the golden, he was to be killed. The judge took the wise man's advice, and the boy grabbed the apple with a laugh. Thus he was set free without any punishment. There once was a father who slaughtered a pig, and his children saw that. In the afternoon, when they began playing, one child said to the other, "You be the little pig, and I'll be the butcher." He then took a shiny knife and slit his little brother's throat. Their mother was upstairs in a room bathing another child, and when she heard the cries of her son, she immediately ran downstairs. Upon seeing what had happened, she took the knife out of her son's throat, and was so enraged that she stabbed the heart of the other boy, who had been playing the butcher. Then she quickly ran back to the room to tend her child in the bathtub, but while she was gone, he had drowned in the tub. Now the woman became so frightened and desperate that she did not allow the neighbors to comfort her, and finally hung herself. When her husband came back from the fields and saw everything, he became so despondent that he died soon after. A mother sat by her little child. She was so sad, so afraid he would die. The child's face was pallid, his little eyes were shut. His breath came faintly now, and then heavily as if he were sighing, and the mother looked more sadly at the dear little soul. There came a knocking at the door. A poor old man hobbled into the house. He was wrapped in thick horse blanket. It kept him warm, and he needed to keep out the wintry cold. For outside, the world was covered with snow and ice, and the wind cut like a knife. As the child was resting quietly for a moment, and the old man was shivering from the cold, the mother put a little mug of beer to warm on the stove for him. The old man rocked the cradle, and the mother sat down near it to watch her sick child, who labored to draw each breath. She lifted his little hand and asked, "You don't think I shall lose him, do you? Would the good Lord take him from me?" The old man was death himself. He jerked his head strangely, in a way that might mean yes, or might mean no. The mother bowed her head and tears ran down her cheeks. Her head was heavy. For 3 days and 3 nights she had not closed her eyes. Now she dozed off to sleep, but only for a moment. Something startled her, and she awoke, shuddering in the cold. "What was that?" she said, looking everywhere about the room. But the old man had gone, and her little child had gone. Death had taken the child away. The old clock in the corner whirred and whirred. Its heavy lead weight dropped down to the floor with a thud. Bong! And the clock stopped. The poor mother rushed wildly out of her house, calling for her child. Out there in the snow sat a woman, dressed in long black garments. "Death," she said, "has been in your house. I just saw him hurrying away with your child in his arms. He goes faster than the wind. and he never brings back what he has taken away." "Tell me which way he went," said the mother. "Only tell me the way. I will find him." "I know," said the woman in black. "But before I tell you, you must sing me all the songs you used to sing to your child. I am Night. I love lullabies, and I hear them often. When you sang them, I saw your tears." "I shall sing them again. You shall hear them all," said the mother. "But do not stop me now. I must catch him. I must hurry to find my child." Night kept silent and still, while the mother wrung her hands, and sang and wept. She sang many songs, but the tears that she shed were many, many more. At last Night said to her, "Go to the right. Go into the dark pine woods. I saw Death go there with your child." Deep into the woods the mother came to a crossroad, where she was at a loss which way to go. At the crossroad grew a blackthorn bush, without a leaf or flower, for it was winter time, and its branches were glazed with ice. "Did you see Death go by with my little child?" "Yes," said the blackthorn bush, "but I shall not tell you which way he went, unless you warn me against your heart. I am freezing to death. I am stiff with ice." She pressed the blackthorn bush against her heart to warm it, and the thorn stabbed deep into her flesh, that great drops of red blood flowed. So warm was the mother's heart that the blackthorn's bush blossomed, and put forth green leaves on the dark winter's night, and it told her the way to go. Then she came to a large lake, where there was neither sailboat nor rowboat. The ice on the lake was too thin to hold her weight, and yet not open or shallow enough for her to wade. But across the lake she must go, if she ever was to find her child. She stooped down to drink the lake dry, and that of course was impossible for any human being, but the poor woman thought that maybe a miracle would happen. "No, that would never do," the lake objected. "Let us make a bargain between us. I collect pearls, and your 2 eyes are the clearest I have ever seen. If you will cry them out for me, I shall carry you over to the great greenhouse where Death lives, and tends his trees and flowers. Each one of them is a human life." "Oh, what I would not give for my child," said the crying mother, as she wept till her eyes dropped down to the bottom of the lake, and became 2 precious pearls. The lake took her up as if in a swing, and swept her to the farther shore. Here stood the strangest house that ever was. It rambled for many a mile. One wouldn't know whether it was a cavernous, forested mountain, or whether it was made of wood. But the poor mother could not see this, for she had cried out her eyes. "Where shall I find Death, who took my child from me?" she cried. "He's not come back yet," said an old woman who took care of the great greenhouse while Death was away. "How did you find your way here? Who helped you?" The Lord helped me," she said. "He is merciful, and so must you be. Where can I find my child?" "I don't know," said the old woman, "and you can't see to find him. But many flowers and trees have withered away in the night, and Death will be along soon to transplant them. Every human being you know has his tree or his flower of life, depending on which sort of person he is. These look like other plants, but they have hearts that beats. A child's heart beats too. You know the beat of your own child's heart? Listen, and you may hear it. But what will you give me if I tell you what else you must do?" "I have nothing left," the poor mother said, "but I will go to the ends of the earth for you." "I have nothing to do there," said the old woman, "but you can give me your long black hair. You know how beautiful it is, and I like it. I'll give you my white hair for it. White hair is better than none." "Is that all you ask?" said the mother. "I will gladly give it to you." And she gave her beautiful long black tresses in exchange for the old woman's white hair. Then they went into Death's great greenhouse, where flowers and trees were strangely entwined. In one place delicate hyacinths were kept under glass bells, and around them great hardy peonies flourished. There were water plants too, some thriving where the stalks of others were choked by twisting water snakes, or gnawed away by black crayfish. Tall palm trees grew there, and plane trees, and oaks. There grew parsley, and sweet-smelling thyme. Every tree or flower went by the name of one particular person, for each was life of someone still living, in China, in Greenland, or in some other part of the world. There were big trees stunted by small pots, which their roots filled to bursting, and elsewhere grew languid little flowers that came to nothing, for all the care that was lavished upon them, and for all the rich earth and the mossy carpet where they grew. The sad, blind mother bent over the tiniest plants and listened to the beat of their human hearts, and among so many millions, she knew her own child's heartbeat. "This is it!" she cried, groping for the little blue crocus, which had wilted and dropped to one side. "Don't touch that flower," the old woman said. "Stay here. Death will be along any minute now, and you may keep him from pulling it up. Threaten him if he does. You will pull up other plants. That will frighten him, for he has to account for them to the Lord. Not one will be uprooted until God says so." Suddenly, an icy wind blew through the place, and the blind mother felt death come near. "How did you find your way here?" he asked. "How did you ever get here before me?" I am a mother," she said. Then Death stretched out his long hand toward the wilted little flower, but she held her hands tightly around it, in terror, lest he touch a single leaf. Death breathed upon her hands, and his breath was colder than the coldest wind. Her hands fell powerless. "You have no power to resist me," Death told her. "But our Lord has," she said. "I only do his will," said Death. "I am his gardener. I take his flowers and trees and plant them again in the great paradise gardens, in the unknown land. But how they thrive, and of their life there, I dare not speak." "Give me back my child," the mother wept and implored him. Suddenly she grasped a beautiful flower in each hand, and she clutched them. She called to Death, "I shall tear out your flowers by the roots, for I am desperate." "Do not touch them," Death told her. "You say you are desperate, yet you would drive another mother to the same despair." "Another mother?" The blind woman's hands let go of the flowers. "Behold," said Death, "you have your eyes again. I saw them shining as I crossed the lake and fished them up, but I did not know they were yours. They are clearer than before. Take them and look deep into this well. I shall tell you the names of the flowers you were about to uproot, and you shall see the whole future of those humans, lives that you would have destroyed and disturbed." She looked into the well, and it made her glad to see one life become a blessing to the world, for it was so kind and happy. Then she saw the other life, which held only sorrow, poverty, fear, and woe. "Both are the will of God," said Death. "Which one is condemned to misery, and which is the happy one?" she asked. "That I shall not tell you," Death said, "but I tell you this. One of the flowers belongs to your own child. One life that you saw was your child's fate, your own child's future." Then the mother shrieked in terror. "Which was my child? Tell me! Save my innocent child. Spare him such wretchedness. Better that he be taken from me. Take him to God's kingdom. Forget my tears. Forget the prayers I've said, and the things I have done." "I do not understand," Death said. "Will you take your own child back, or shall I take him off to the land unknown to you?" Then the mother wrung her hands, fell on her knees, and prayed to God. "Do not hear me when I pray against your will. It is best. Do not listen. Do not listen!" And she bowed her head, as Death took her child to the unknown land. I have frequently wondered if the majority of mankind ever pause to reflect upon the occasionally titanic significance of dreams, and of the obscure world which they belong. Whilst the greater number of our nocturnal visions are perhaps no more than faint and fantastic reflections of our waking experiences, Freud, to the contrary, with his puerile symbolism, there are still a certain remainder whose immundane and ethereal character permits of no ordinary interpretation, and whose vaguely exciting and disquieting effect suggests possible minute glimpses into the sphere of mental existence, no less important than physical life, yet separated from that life by an all but impassable barrier. From my experiences, I cannot doubt but that man, when lost to terrestrial consciousness, is indeed sojourning in another and incorporeal life of far different nature from the life we know, and of which only the slightest and most indistinct memories linger after waking. From those blurred and fragmentary memories we may infer much yet prove little. We may guess that in dreams life, matter, and vitality, as the earth knows such things, are not necessarily constant, and that time and space do not exist as our waking selves comprehend them. Sometimes I believe that this less material life is our truer life, and that our vain presence on the terrageous globe is itself the secondary, or merely a virtual phenomenon. It was from a youthful reverie filled with speculation of this sort that I arose one afternoon in the winter of 1900-1901, when the state psychopathic institution in which I served as an intern was brought the man whose case has ever haunted me so unceasingly. His name, as given on the records, was Joe Slater, or Slater, and his appearance was that of a typical denizen of the Catskill Mountain region, one of those strange repellent scions of a primitive colonial peasant stock, whose isolation for nearly 3 centuries in the hilly fatnesses of the little-travelled countryside has caused them to sink to a kind of barbaric degeneracy, rather than advance with their more fortunately placed brethren of their thickly settled districts. Among these odd folks who correspond exactly to the decadent element of white trash in the South, law and morals are non-existent, and their general mental status is probably below that of any section of the Native American people. Joe Slater, who came to the institution in the vigilant custody of 4 state policemen, and who was described as a highly dangerous character, certainly presented no evidence of his perilous disposition when first I beheld him. Though well above the middle stature and of somewhat brawny frame, he was given an absurd appearance of harmless stupidity by the pale, sleepy blueness of his small, watery eyes, the scantiness of his neglected and never-shaven growth of his yellow beard, and the listless drooping of his heavy nether lip. His age was unknown, since among his kind neither family records nor permanent family ties exist, but from his baldness of his head and front, and from the decayed condition of his teeth, the head surgeon wrote him down as a man of about 40. From the medical and court documents we learned all that could be gathered of his case. This man, a vagabond, hunter and trapper, had always been strange in the eyes of his primitive associates. He had habitually slept at night beyond the ordinary time, and upon waking would often talk of unknown things in a manner so bizarre as to inspire fear even in the hearts of the unimaginative populace. Not that his form of language was all that unusual, for he never spoke, save in the debased pathos of his environment, but the tone and tenor of his utterance were of such mysterious wildness that none might listen without apprehension. He himself was generally as terrified and baffled as his auditors, and within an hour after awakening would forget all that he had said, or at least all that had caused him to say what he did, relapsing into a bovine, half-amiable normality like that of the other hill-dwellers. As Slater grew older, it appeared his matutinal aberrations had gradually increased in frequency and violence, till about a month before his arrival of the institution had occurred the shocking tragedy which caused his arrest by the authorities. One day near noon, after a profound sleep began a whiskey debauch at about 5 of the previous afternoon, the man had roused himself most suddenly, with ululations so horrible and unearthly that they brought several neighbours to his cabin, a filthy sty, where he dwelt with a family as indescribable as himself. Rushing out into the snow, he had flung his arms aloft and commenced a series of leaps directly upward in the air, while shouting his determination to reach some big cabin with brightness in the roof and walls and floor, and the loud, queer music far away. As 2 men of moderate size sought to restrain him, he had struggled with the maniacal force and fury, screaming of his desire and need to find and kill a certain thing that shines and shakes and laughs. At length, After temporarily felling one of his detainers with a sudden blow, he had flung himself upon the other in a demonic ecstasy of bloodthirstiness, shrieking fiendishly that he would jump high in the air and burn his way through anything that stopped him. Family and neighbours had now fled in a panic, and when the more courageous of them returned, Slater was gone, leaving behind an unrecognizable pulp-like thing that had been a living man but an hour before. None of the mountaineers had dared to pursue him, and it is likely that they would have welcomed his death from the cold. But when several mornings later they heard his screams from a distant ravine, they realized that he had somehow managed to survive, and that his removal in one way or another would be necessary. Then had followed an armed searching party, whose purpose, whatever it may have been originally, became that of the sheriff's posse, after one of the seldom popular state troopers had by accident observed, then questioned, and finally joined the seekers. On the third day, Slater was found unconscious in a hollow of a tree, and taken to the nearest jail, where the alienists from Albany examined him as soon as his senses had returned. To them, he told a story. He had, he said, gone to sleep one afternoon about sundown after drinking much liquor. He had awakened to find himself standing bloody-handed in the snow before his cabin, the mangled corpse of his neighbor Peter Slater at his feet. Horrified, he had taken to the woods in a vague effort to escape from the scene of what must have been his crime. Beyond these things, he seemed to know nothing, nor could the expert questioning of his interrogators bring out a single additional fact. That night, Slater slept quietly, and the next morning he wakened with no singular feature save a certain alteration of his expression. Dr. Barnard, who had been watching the patient, thought he noticed in the pale blue eyes a certain gleam of peculiar quality, and in his flaccid lips an all but imperceptible tightening, as if of intelligent determination. But when questioned, Slater relapsed into the habitual vacancy of the mountaineer, and only reiterated what he had said on the preceding day. On the third morning occurred the first of the man's mental attacks. After some show of uneasiness in sleep, he burst forth into a frenzy so powerful that combined efforts of 4 men were needed to bind him into a straitjacket. The alienists listened with keen attention to his words, since their curiosity had been aroused to the high pitch by the suggestive yet mostly conflicting and incoherent stories of his family and neighbours. Slater raved for upwards of 15 minutes, babbling in his backwoods dialect of great deficits of light, oceans of space, strange music, and shadowy mountains and valleys. But most of all, did he dwell upon some mysterious blazing entity that shook and laughed and mocked at him. This vast, vague personality seemed to have done him in a terrible wrong, and to kill it in a triumphant revenge was his paramount desire. In order to reach it, he said he would have to soar through abysses of emptiness, burning every obstacle that stood in his way. Thus ran his discourse, until with the greatest suddenness it ceased. The fire of madness died from his eyes, and in dull wonder he looked at his questioners and asked why he was bound. Dr. Barnard unbuckled the leather harness, and did not restore it till night, when he succeeded in persuading Slater to do it himself, for his own good. The man had now admitted that he sometimes talked queerly, though he knew not why. Within a week, 2 more attacks appeared, but from them the doctors learned little. On the source of Slater's visions they speculated at length, for since he could neither read nor write, and had apparently never heard of a legend of a fairy tale, his gorgeous imagery was quite inexplicable. That it could not come from any known myth or romance was made especially clear by the fact that the unfortunate lunatic expressed himself only in his own simple manner. He raved of things he did not understand, and could not interpret, things which he claimed to have experienced, but which he could not have learned through any normal or connected narration. The alienists soon agreed that abnormal dreams were the foundation of the trouble. Dreams whose vividness could for a time completely dominate the walking mind of this basically inferior man. With due formality, Slater was tried for murder, acquitted on the ground of insanity, and committed to the institution wherein I held so humble of a post. I have said that I am a constant speculator concerning dream life, and from this you may judge of an eagerness with which I applied myself to the study of the new patient, as soon as I had fully ascertained the facts of his case. He seemed to sense a certain friendliness in me, born no doubt of the interest I could not conceal, and the gentle manner in which I questioned him. Not that he ever recognized me during his attacks, when I hung breathlessly upon his chaotic cosmic word pictures, but he knew me in his quiet hours, when he would sit by his barred window, weaving baskets of straw and willow, and perhaps pining for the mountain freedom he could never enjoy again. His family never called to see him. Probably it had found another temporary head, after the manner of the decadent mountain folk. By degrees I commenced to feel an overwhelming wonder at the mad and fantastic conceptions of Joe Slater. The man himself was pitiably inferior in mentally and language alike, but his glowing titanic visions, though described in a barbarous and disjointed jargon, were assuredly things which only a superior or even exceptional brain could conceive. How, I often asked myself, could the stolid imagination of a Catskill degenerate conjure up sights whose very possession argued a lurking spark of genius? How could any backwards dullard have gained so much as an idea of those glittering realms of supernatural radiance and space about which Slater ranted in his furious delirium? More and more I inclined to believe that in this pitiful personality who cringed before me lay the disordered nucleus of something beyond my comprehension. Something infinitely beyond the comprehension of my more experienced but less imaginative medical and scientific colleagues. And yet I could extract nothing definite from the man. The sum of all my investigations was that in a kind of semi-incorporeal dream life Slater wandered or floated through resplendent and prestigious valleys, meadows, gardens, cities, and palaces of light, in a region unbound and unknown to man. That there he was no peasant or degenerate, but a creature of importance and vivid life, moving proudly and dominantly, and checked only by a certain deadly enemy, who seemed to be a being of visible yet ethereal structure, and who did not appear to be of human shape. Slater never referred to it as a man, or as aught save a thing. This thing had done Slater some hideous but unnamed wrong, which the maniac, if maniac he was, yearned to avenge. From the manner in which Slater alluded to their dealings, I judged that he is the luminous thing that had met on equal terms, that in his dream existence the man was himself a luminous thing of same race as his enemy. This impression was sustained by his frequent references to flying through space and burning all that impeded his progress. Yet these conceptions were formulated in rustic words wholly inadequate to convey them. A circumstance which drove me to a conclusion that if a true dream world indeed existed, could it be that the dream soul inhabiting this inferior body was desperately struggling to speak things which the simple and halting tongue of the dullness could not utter? Could it be that I was face to face with intellectual emanations which would explain the mystery if I could but learn to discover and read them? I did not tell the older physicians of these things, for middle age is skeptical, cynical, and disinclined to accept new ideas. Besides, the head of the institution had but lately warned me in his paternal way that I was overworking, that my mind needed a rest. It had long been my belief that human thought consists basically of atomic or molecular motion, convertible into ether waves of radiant energy like heat, light, and electricity. This belief had early led me to contemplate the possibility of telepathy or mental communication by means of suitable apparatus. And I had in my college days prepared a set of transmitting and receiving instruments, somewhat similar to the cumbrous devices employed in wireless telegraphy at the crude pre-radio period. These I had tested with a fellow student, but achieving no result, had soon packed them away with other scientific odds and ends for possible future use. Now, in my intense desire to probe into the dream life of Joe Slater, I sought these instruments again, and spent several days repairing them for action. When they were complete once more, I missed no opportunity for their trial. At each outburst of Slater's violence, I would fit the transmitter to his forehead, and the receiver to my own, constantly making delicate adjustments for various hypothetical wavelengths of intellectual energy. I had but little notion of how the thought impressions would, if successfully conveyed, arouse an intelligent response in my brain, but I felt certain that I would detect and interrupt them. Accordingly, I continued my experiments, though informing no one of their nature. It was on the 21st of February 1901 that the thing finally occurred. As I look back across the years, I realize how unreal it seems, and sometimes half wonder if old Dr. Fenton was not right when he charged it all to my excited imagination. I recall that he listened with great kindness and patience when I told him, but afterward gave me a nerve powder and arranged for a half-year's vacation, on which I departed the next week. That fateful night I was wildly agitated and perturbed, for despite the excellent care he had received, Joe Slater was unmistakably dying. Perhaps it was his mountain freedom that he missed, or perhaps the turmoil in his brain had grown too acute for his rather sluggish physique. But at all events, the flame of vitality flickered low in the decadent body. He was drowsy, near the end, and as darkness fell he dropped off into a troubled sleep. I did not strap on the straitjacket, as was customary when he slept, since I saw that he was too feeble to be dangerous, even if he woke in mental disorder once more before passing away. But I did place upon his head and mine the two ends of my cosmic radio, hoping against hope for the first and last message from the dream world in the brief time remaining. In the cell with us was one nurse, a mediocre fellow who did not understand the purpose of the apparatus or think to inquire into my course. As the hours wore on, I saw his head droop awkwardly into a sleep, but I did not disturb him. I myself, lulled by the rhythmical breathing of the healthy and dying man, must have nodded a little later. The sound of weird lyric melody is what aroused me. Chords, vibrations, and harmonic ecstasies echoed passionately on every hand, while on my ravished sight burst the stupendous spectacle of ultimate beauty. Walls, columns, and architraves of living fire blazed effulgently around the spot where I seemed to float in the air, extending upward to an infinite high-vaulted dome of indescribable splendor. Blending with this display of palatial magnificence, or rather, supplementing at times in a kaleidoscopic rotation, were glimpses of wide plains of graceful valleys, high mountains, and inviting grottos, covered with every lovely attribute of scenery which my delighted eye could conceive of, yet formed wholly of some glowing, ethereal, plastic entity, which in its consistency partook as much of spirit as of matter. As I gazed, I perceived that my own brain held the key to these enchanting metamorphoses, for each vista which appeared to me was the one my changing mind most wished to behold. Amidst this Elysian realm I dwelt not as a stranger, for each sight and sound was familiar to me, just as it has been for uncounted eons of eternity before, and would be like for eternities to come. Then the resplendent aura of my brother of light drew near, and held colloquy with me, soul to soul, with silent and perfection interchange of thought. The hour was one of approaching triumph, for was not my fellow being escaping at the last of the degrading periodic bondage, escaping forever, and preparing to follow the accursed oppressor, even unto the uttermost fields of ether, that upon it might be wrought the flaming cosmic vengeance, which would shake the spheres? We floated thus for a little time, when I perceived the slight blurring and fading of the objects around us, as though some force were recalling me to earth, where I least wished to go. The form near me seemed to feel a change also, for it gradually brought its discourse toward a conclusion, and itself prepared to quit the scene, fading from my sight at a rate somewhat less rapid than the other objects. A few more thoughts were exchanged, and I knew that the luminous one and I were being recalled to bondage, though for my brother of light it would be the last time. The sorry planet shell being well nigh spent, in less than an hour my fellow would be free to pursue the oppressor along the Milky Way, and pass the hither stars to the very confines of infinity. A well-defined shock separates my final impression of the fading scene of light from my sudden and somewhat shamefaced awakening and straightening up in my chair as I saw the dying figure on the couch move hesitantly. Joe Slater was indeed awakening, though probably for the last time. As I looked more closely, I saw that in the sallow cheeks shone spots of colour which had never before been present. The lips, too, seemed unusual, being tightly compressed as if by force of a stronger character than had been Slater's. The whole face finally began to grow tense, and the head turned relentlessly with closed eyes. I did not arouse the sleeping nurse, but readjusted the slightly disarranged headbands of my telegraphic radio, intent to catch any parting message the dreamer might have to deliver. All at once the head turned sharply in my direction and the eyes fell open, causing me to stare in blank amazement at what I beheld. The man who had been Joe Slater, the Catskill descendant, was now gazing at me with a pair of luminous, expanded eyes whose blue seemed subtly to have deepened. Neither mania nor degeneracy was visible in that gaze, and I felt beyond doubt that I was viewing the face behind which lay an active mind of higher order. At this junction, my brain became aware of a steady external influence operating upon it. I closed my eyes to concentrate my thoughts more profoundly, and was rewarded by a positive knowledge that my long-sought mental message had come at last. Each transmitted idea formed rapidly in my mind, and though no actual language was employed, my habitual association of conception and expression was so great that I seemed to be receiving the message in ordinary English. Joe Slater is dead, came the soul-petrifying voice of an agency from beyond the wall of sleep. My opened eyes sought the couch of pain and curious horror, but the blue eyes were still calmly gazing, and the countenance was still intelligently animated. He is better dead, for he was unfit to bear the active intellect of cosmic entity. His gross body could not undergo the needed adjustments between the ethereal life and the planet life. He was too much of an animal, too little a man. Yet it is through his deficiency that you come to discover me. For the cosmic and planet souls rightly should never meet. He has been my torment and eternal prison for 42 of your terrestrial years. I am an entity like that which you yourself become on the freedom of dreamless sleep. I am your brother of light, and have floated with you in the effulgent valleys. It is not permitted me to tell your walking earth self of your real self, but we are all roamers of vast spaces and travellers in many ages. Next year, I may be dwelling in the dark Egypt which you call ancient, or in the cruel empire of San-Chan, which is to come 3,000 years hence. You and I have drifted to the worlds that reel about the red Arcturus, and dwelt in the bodies of the insect philosophers that crawl proudly over the fourth moon of Jupiter. How little does the earth self know of life, and its extent, how little indeed, ought it to know for its own tranquility. Of the oppressor I cannot speak. You on earth have unwittingly felt its distant presence. You, without knowing idly, gave to its blinking beacon the name of Algol, the demon star. It is to meet and conquer the oppressor that I have vainly striven for eons. Held back by bodily encumbrances, tonight I go as a nemesis, bearing just and blazingly cataclysmic vengeance. Watch me in the sky close by the demon star. I cannot speak longer, for the body of Joe Slater grows cold and rigid, and the coarse brains are ceasing to vibrate as I wish. You have been my friend in the cosmos. You have been my only friend on this planet, the only soul to sense and seek for me within the repellent form which lies on this couch. We shall meet again, perhaps in the shining mists of the Orion's sword, perhaps on a bleak plateau in the prehistoric Asia, perhaps in the unremembered dreams tonight, perhaps in some other form an eon hence, when the solar system shall have been swept away. At this point the thought waves abruptly ceased, and the pale eyes of the dreamer, or can I say dead man, commenced to glaze fissually. In a half stupor I crossed over to the couch and felt his wrist, but found it cold, stiff, and pulseless. The sallow cheeks paled again, and the thick lips fell open, disclosing in repulsively rotten fangs of the degenerate Joe Slater. I shivered, pulled a blanket over his hideous face, and awakened the nurse. Then I left the cell and went silently to my room. I had an insistent and uncountable craving for a sleep whose dreams I should not remember. The climax? What plain tale science can boast of such a rhetorical effect? I have merely set down certain things appealing to me as facts, allowing you to construe them as you will. As I have already admitted, my superior, old Dr. Fenton, denies the reality of everything I have related. He vows that I was broken down with nervous strain, and badly in the need of a long vacation on full pay which he as generously gave me. He assures me on his professional honor that Joe Slater was but a low-grade paranoiac, whose fantastic notions must have come from the crude, hereditary folk tales, which circulate in the even most decadent of the communities. All this he tells me, yet I cannot forget what I saw in the sky on the night after Slater died. Lest you think me a biased witness, another's pen must add this final testimony, which may perhaps supply the climax you expect. I will quote the following account of the star, nova perci verbatim, from the pages of the eminent astronomical authority, Professor Garrett P. Service. On February the 22nd, 1901, a marvelous new star was discovered by Dr. Andersen of Edinburgh, not very far from Algol. No star had been visible at this point before. Within 24 hours the stranger had become so bright that it outshone Capella. In a week or two it had visibly faded, and in the course of a few months it was hardly discernible with the naked eye. There once were two sisters, close in age, who had been birthed and loved and became stooped and wise, and were now old women together. They lived in a house in a courtyard, surrounded by a tall stone wall, meant to keep out most children and all men. Those starlings made their nests in the boughs of the elms. One day, the king, an old man himself, was walking by the wall, when he heard the lilting voices of the sisters, who had become accomplished singers over their long years. He listened for a while, his eyes narrowed with contentment, and then ambled his way to the small gap in the mortar. "What sweet creatures sing behind these walls?" he asked. Both sisters scrambled for the gap, but the first sister, a little taller, with slightly longer legs, got there first. "We have always been here, your highness," she said, her voice gravelly at the edge. "Show me," the king said. So the first sister slipped her finger into the gap. She felt the king's breath puff on her skin, and then his lips enveloped it. The thrill she felt. Out of sight, the king's mouth was wet and tight, like probing her own sex, and she felt a kick of desire as he suckled her fingertip, as if it were a nipple. At the edge of a pull and draw was a nip of teeth, and she moaned. Excited by this, the king bit down and drew blood, which excited him further. It was all he could do to not lose himself from his clothes. "My young maiden," he said, "my blushing, tender girl, come to my bedchamber tonight. I wish to be your first, to barricade past your maidenhead." The sisters laughed silently behind their hands, for they had rid themselves of their maidenheads long ago. But then the first sister said sweetly, "My king, you may have any part of me you wish. I will be there tonight." And then the king was gone. The first sister withdrew her finger and examined the bite marks at their tip. Before she departed, She had her second sister gather up her extra skin and pin it tightly behind her back, so that she might appear young as the king believed her to be. That night, the sister arrived at a castle beneath a cloak, and was whisked upstairs by staff as silent as dolls. From outside his bedchamber door she said, "My love, I am afraid of fire. Please, put out the candles before I enter." From within, she heard the hiss of a snuffed flame. The door opened. In the silt of the shadows they made love. Afterwards, as she glowed with sensation, the first sister wished him to see her as she really was. She wanted his pleasure to come from her stomach and thighs and breasts, not those of some imaginary creature. And so in the darkness she stood, and unpinned her skin. She struck a match and laid it to the candle's wick. The king, horrified by her shape, leapt from the bed. He shoved her toward the window, and then out of it. "Please, please!" she begged as he pried her fingertips from the ledge. He did not even stay to watch her fall. The first sister plummeted down and down, but just before she struck the ground, she became tangled in branches of a tree. Its thorns hooked into the soft folds of her body. She screamed and cried, and hung there like a tanning hide. It was then that a group of fairies passed by. They laughed at the old woman in the tree, bare and slick and weeping. Her humiliation was intoxicating to them as wine. Fairies are very indulgent, self-satisfied creatures, and their meddling knows no end. And so one of them waved his finger, and the first sister drooped to the earth. She lay on the cool soil, afraid to move. The fairies walked off, and she heard their voices long after they disappeared into the night. Her tears dried and left streaks of salt behind. When the first sister finally stood up, she felt strange, no longer sore, and supple as reed. She ran her hands over her body, apple firm and smooth. Her flesh was young again. The second sister waited for the first sister to return. They had shared lovers throughout their long lives, and as soon as they were together again, the second sister knew that she would learn the secrets of the king's pleasure and take her own in turn. But when the night thinned into dawn, and then day, and the first sister did not return, the second sister left their home to find her. She walked along the wall and through the door, and out into the bright world. All she found near the castle was a beautiful young maiden, sitting naked beneath a tree. "Excuse me," said the second sister. "I don't mean to trouble you, but have you seen—" It was then that she recognized her sister's eyes, hazel as her own. The first sister looked at the second sister with horror. Had her own skin hung in such a way? Had she been so shriveled, so loose, so ancient, she could barely remember? "What's happened to you?" said the second sister. "This is the skin that was beneath," the first sister said. She closed her eyes and shook her head, as if disagreeing with herself. She tried to explain again. "This is my true skin." The second sister reached out and touched the first sister's jaw. It was dawny and soft, as a newborn fawn. They did not have skin like this since they were young women together. "You're gone," she said. "Sister, you've left me behind." The first sister pulled her face away. "I'm sorry," she said. She stood up and walked back toward the castle to find the king. The second sister walked to town and located a barber. "Take my skin," she said. She handed him a coin. "Take it off," he said. She handed him a second coin. He shrugged. He dragged his razor up and down a leather strap, and then held it up for inspection. The blade edge caught the morning light. It was like the sweet, briny bite of sugar against an open nerve. Then, like being dropped into the sun, the second sister continued to live even after the barber hung her skin from his window, and then sold it to a bookbinder. But with no flesh to contain her body, the wet meat of her muscle and the roping of her tendons were full on display. Bits of dust and soil clung to her damp organs. She often woke to the sensation of mice scrabbling beneath her breastbone, of skittering cockroaches round her eye. On the rare occasion when she ventured beyond the wall, mothers would bend down to their children and point at her. "See?" they would say. "This is what happens when you don't worry about your looks. Such is the price of vanity." She spent the remainder of her life wiping crumbs from her joints and crevices, tears draining through her body like raindrops sliding down a window pane. As for the first sister, There are many stories about how she ended up trawling the earth for her old skin. In the first, the king died, and when she went to find her sister, she discovered a dead, shucked corpse in a chair by the old fireplace, and she clutched the body and wept and wept. In another, the king tired of her, and their old home was vacant and lined with dust, and soon she found herself wandering the land alone. No matter the story, one thing is the same. She missed her old skin. She felt vulnerable without its age and warmth, like a fox pelt silver with time, and its power of concealment. This taut, ageless woman, her skin gleaming like dew clinging to a stem and petal, with a mouth like a pitted cherry, was never left alone. Wherever she went, men followed with their hands and cocks and voices, their hungers and wants and desires. They trampled and pursued. She hunted down the fairies. She demanded they return her skin to her, and when they laughed and refused, she pulled their heads from their bodies like dandelions. In this way, she walked and searched until the end of her days. Her grief never abated, and when she died, and should have become part of the soil, she remained unchanged, and unmutable as wax. She is there still, if you know where to look.